Hello, this is Kurt bringing you the third of the Lichess4545 Season 11 game reviews. This is going to be our board 4 game between JohnJPershing and Tothecloid. Not to the cloud, to the Cloid. And I know in my last video I promised something special for this video, but I actually confused myself. I was going to do something special in a shorter game. I thought this was a shorter game. It's actually the board 4 game that's a little bit shorter. So this is going to be a normal video, you know, just like the other ones. But next time, there really will be something special. I promise. I have ideas. I promise. Just something to note about this game as well. The average rating of the players in this game is actually lower than the average rating of the players in the previous game. That's because, or I don't know exactly why that's because, but the likely explanation is that one of the players, one of the board 5 players, I Check You Mate, likely gained a lot of rating during the season, and as such was slightly overrated for his board. But we have JohnJPershing clocking at 1650 versus Tothecloid 1700. Let's check this game out. We get a French defense and the Tarrasch variation. Black plays the closed Tarrasch. This is my personal choice. I'm a French player as well. I like to play the closed Tarrasch. The open Tarrasch, I've never been a huge fan of. I think white just usually gets a pretty nice position, doesn't have too much to worry about. So I do like these closed Tarraschs. They tend to be a little bit more dynamic, and black should be okay if he knows what he's doing. Yeah, I mean, black can be slightly worse in these positions, but you're black, you deal with it. E5, knight e7, of course, getting the knight out of the way. And here, we already have a very interesting choice from the white player. White normally goes bishop d3, that's a totally good move, just developing the bishop to a nice square. Also c3, just supporting this d4 pawn. But in this game, white played a move that I've never faced in my play, and I can honestly say I've never even considered in this position. And that move is c4. A very interesting move. And after some analysis, I think I've determined that the reason I've never faced this move before is because it's bad. This is a bad move. The reason it's so bad is that you have to consider sort of the strategic themes of the French defense. And the strategic themes of the French defense is black's going to give up some space in the center, but he's going to counterattack the center with c5 and f6 and try and break down this pawn chain to gain dynamic counterplay against white's space. And white usually looks to sort of shore up the center. That's why c3 is one of the main moves here. And sometimes white will even play f4, just really cementing his center. The problem with c4 is now black's plan becomes more effective because the pawn on d4 is much harder to protect. If white wanted to play this way, then the knight isn't really happy here. Like, the knight would rather be on c3, but I mean, it's hard to put the knight on c3 if you want to play c4. So, yeah, I don't know about this move. I think it's just a poor move. Not a good move out of the opening. Perhaps not understanding black's strategic ideas of trying to break down the center. So, sorry, my phone just rang. To his credit, I think black played a very, very strong move here. Black probably spent some time here. I know I would spend some time here if I'd never seen this move before. And maybe ask himself, what's the drawback of the move c4? Well, he can't play c3. So how can I exploit that? I can attack the weakened center pawn. This is a very strong move from black. Black is saying, you've left yourself weaknesses here. White played knight gf3, developing, protecting his pawn. It's a very reasonable move. it's also possible to take and then play knight gf3. These likely transpose. Usually, in most variations, white is taking here, and black is never really taking here, so it's fine to sort of reserve your options here. That's totally fine. And black followed up with a move I'm not 100% sure on. This move, bishop e7, is fine, developing a new piece. The bishop is probably going to land on e7 at some point anyway, but it feels like there's something more important going on right now, which is a battle for the center. And the bishop on e7 actually doesn't really do much to impact the center here. So a much more logical move from the black side is the move knight c6, immediately putting more pressure on this d4 point. And after something like takes, we see that it's actually very difficult to maintain this pawn on d4. For instance, if you try knight b3, then I can take and take. And white probably has some compensation on because black's king is a little bit spacious, but this should be very good for black. It's a strong center pawn, and if white doesn't drum up immediate play, he will be in a lot of trouble. So white here played probably a good move, bishop e2, just getting on with his development. Another, I'm sorry, this is not the game position, excuse me. After bishop e7, white played bishop e2, which is probably a good move, just completing his development. You could consider playing this move, dc5, and the reason this move becomes sort of more playable is now if black wants to take with the bishop, he'd have to waste a tempo here, and if black takes with a knight, all of a sudden white actually will likely maintain this pawn on e5. So probably the best move for black in this position is to go knight c6 and simply take this pawn. It's impossible to defend. Not impossible, but if you play a move like queen e2, that's totally screwing up your development for forever. So yeah, here this e5 pawn is falling, and that means black is going to complete development faster, and white won't have any central space to sort of claim for that lack of development. So I like this move bishop e2. It's making the best of a bad situation. Black goes knight c6, very good. Takes. Like we were talking about, white can really insert this at any moment. Black is never really interested in taking here. That would allow things like, oops, not that one, knight c4 into d6, which could be unpleasant. So takes. And here, white has an interesting choice to make. There's actually a couple possible variations here. White played knight b3, which seems like a logical choice, defending the d-pawn, but it runs into some immediate strategical issues. Probably better is actually giving the pawn with castles. This is a little bit strange, because after takes, the point is to go knight b3. And you are sacrificing a pawn. Takes, but you gain quite a good bit of time here after queen takes d4. White has some pressure. Is it enough for the pawn? Maybe, not so clear. Play might continue bishop f6 with a pretty strong threat. And here, white has options. This move bishop b5 is maybe a little bit annoying for you. The reason is, if you go bishop d7, I can actually snag my pawn back with a reasonable position. So maybe you go knight c6, but then I go rook e1 check, right? White just keeps posing black with tiny little problems that aren't so nice, just because white finished develop a little bit quicker. Once again, not claiming white is better, but it's an interesting variation. Instead, white chose not to give the pawn with the move knight b3, but here black played very powerfully. Like I mentioned, this move has strategic issues, which black quickly pointed out after the move c4. And the strategic issue here is that black is winning a ton of time and creates a 3 versus 2 queenside majority, which will be very, very quick because black has gained so much time. White went knight b3, I got to play a move I sort of wanted to play anyway, and then you had to go back. So you lost 2 tempi and forced me to play a move I wanted to play. That means my play is going to come very, very quickly here. So c4, a very nice move. And now black's simply going to play on the queen side, try and create a pass pawn on the queen side, and white will have to play either in the center or on the king side, but it's not exactly clear how white makes that happen. Knight bd2, castles, castles, and as advertised, b5. Very good. Here, black is simply saying, I'm going to do exactly what I said I was going to do and push my queenside pawns. I'm going to go b4, c3, unless you do something about it. So here, white says, I don't want b4. I don't want b4 whatsoever. And on our next move, I think the black player made a poor choice. So let's look at this position a little bit and think about it. I think there's 3 reasonable moves for black. When we think about this middle game, I've said this a million times over, we look at the structure, we look at our pieces. So black's structural idea we've been over, it's to push on the queen side. So my structural idea is telling me to play the move a5. And I think that's a very reasonable move. Just saying, well, let's go. I want to play on the queen side. I want to play b4. Now, I'm not quite ready to play b4 yet because my rook is hanging, which means my a pawn would be pinned. But I'll play it soon once I've prepared it. So a5 is a very logical move just from looking at the structure. The other thing that we look at is our pieces. And I noticed that my pieces aren't happy right now. Especially these 2 pieces. This knight on d7 is really, really unhappy, limited by this central structure. And this bishop on c8 is being limited by the knight on d7. They're very much getting in each other's way. So other moves I would consider would be moves related to improving these pieces. So one move that, of course, stands out to me is the simple move, knight b6. Just improving the knight, allowing the bishop to seize, so maybe the bishop will come to e6, f5, perhaps even g4, a little bit unlikely, but the bishop looks like it's nice on f5, that's a good diagonal. And the other thing that the knight does on b6 is it protects the rook. So that aforementioned problem with a5, next move, if I play a5, I'm ready to go b4. So this knight on b6 is multi-purpose. But the knight on b6 is not some grand piece. So I think actually the best move in this position is trying to give this knight a very good square. And so the very logical move here to me is the move f6. And the reason this is so logical is I just want to give this knight good squares to go to. The knight will come to f6, and then it has these very, very strong squares in its sights. And the problem that white faces is white really must take. If he takes, the e5 pawn is too weak, it won't be held. And white can't really play e6, because then this pawn is impossible to defend on e6. e6, just knight b6. I'm going to wrap him up and be a pawn up. I'll be very happy. So in this position, white would have to take, and after knight takes f6, black has basically only good pieces. This knight controls the center, puts pressure on d4. This knight also controls the center, might leap into e4. This bishop will come to f5, and black's position makes lots and lots of sense. In fact, even though black has queenside space, black could consider maybe an adventure on the king side as well, because white's pieces are so jumbled up over here. So this would have been very good for black. Instead of all of these, black played the move queen b6. And I'm not sure really what this accomplishes, because I'm not totally sure what the queen is doing on b6. I understand it's attacking the d4 pawn, but white actually has a very convenient way of defending that. And the queen is sort of supporting b4, but again, this rook is a problem. So, yeah, not the best move. Not dealing with his minor pieces, which are a little bit tangled up. He's also taken the b6 square from the knight. And here, white played very powerfully. White, again, looked at his position, looked for structural ideas. Well, white doesn't really have any strong structural ideas right now. He probably needs to go f4, f5 at some point, but he can't right now because his pieces are in the way. Also, his d-pawn's hanging. So white resorted to his pieces, and we see that white has a similar problem black did. This knight sucks. This bishop is being blocked in by the knight. Also, this bishop is fairly poor, just hitting on this wall. So white played a move to defend the d-pawn and clear out this traffic jam. And it's a very, very powerful move. The move knight b1. Clears the queen, prepares to put the knight on a very good square. This knight is attacking black's weakest point on d5, and prepares to bring this bishop out somewhere. e3, f4, g5. It's not going to be a world beater anywhere, but at least it'll be off the back rank. So knight b1, very good. Black goes bishop b7. The point of this move, bishop b7, is first he's developing a piece. Second, knight c3 will attack this pawn. He'll need to have some defense of it, so this makes sense. White develops bishop e3. Knight c3 was also a good move, but bishop e3 is fine, developing a piece. He's also perhaps getting ready to move this knight by protecting the d-pawn again, getting ready to play f4, f5. It's possible. So this move makes sense to me. And here, I really don't like black's move. So we've talked about how black has been neglecting his pieces here. This knight especially is really feeling sad because now f6 isn't really even as good because white is not obliged to take it, because on takes, that's a discovered attack on the queen, which would gain time for the white player. So after f6, white can just play a move like knight c3 and say, okay, is there a problem? And here white's position is actually reasonable, more reasonable than it should be given this this game. So this knight all of a sudden has become a very problematic piece. So black needs to create play. The move I immediately look at is a5. But here, maybe white can be a little bit annoying. White can play a move like b3, trying to undermine the structure a little bit, stop you from playing b4. Perhaps even knight c3. Yeah, this move is maybe even more problematic because you kind of have to go knight d8, and all of a sudden both knights aren't exactly where they want to be. Even here, black should be better because b4 is coming. But this shouldn't be too bad for white after, say, queen c2, b4, takes, 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 and unfortunately, actually, white can maybe go knight a4 here. This might be reasonable. With a not horrendous position. So, probably the best move in this position is to go knight a5. This is a very strong move. And the point of this move, it really wasn't apparent to me at first. Oops, sorry. The point of this move, knight a5, is we saw in that previous variation, after a5, knight c3, the knight had to go to d8. So what black is doing is maneuvering the knight into a soft spot on the queen side. White weakened this square when he played a3. So knight a5, knight c3, knight b3, rook b1, and only now playing a5. And this is really bad for white. White was forced to give up the a file. No, I mean he wasn't forced, but you like if you put your rook on a2, then your rook's on a2. That's such a clumsy piece. So a5, b4 is coming. My knight's a monster. Everything is defended well. Yeah, my knight on d7 is bad, but okay, he makes up for it. My queen side makes up for it. So this would be very unpleasant. Black instead played b4, which is not the right idea. And the reason it's not the right idea is black needs to create a passed pawn on the queen side. That's how we generate play. We're going to create weaknesses and pass pawns. And this will not generate a passed pawn because after takes, both sides have weaknesses, but neither side is getting a passed, or sorry, black really has to push a5, a4, a3 to get a passed pawn, which is going to take him a really long time. Whereas if he just goes something like a5 here, the passed pawn comes much quicker. So b4, the problem is when you play b4, you want to take back with a pawn. That's the whole point of this play. And when you don't, you leave yourself with a weakness. Yes, white has a weakness, but it's very difficult to attack. How are you attacking b2? You're going to attack it with the queen once, but I'll play something like queen c2. You have to move the knight to attack the b pawn. I'll play queen c2. I'll say, what's the problem? My pawn's defended. So it's very difficult for black to make any progress on the queen side after this. White will go knight c3. And pretty soon, white's going to play a move like knight e1, f4, f5, and white will actually have threats on the king's side as well. So black had this initiative on the queen side, but he tried to cash it in a little bit too fast and failed to realize that the structural change he was initiating really wasn't favorable to him. So b4, not best. And as pointed out, white should take. White played something quite interesting. I'm not going to say it's bad, because it's not. However, I'm a simple man. I would take this and alter the structure favorably to me. But white played the move b3, which is not the first move I was think of, but it turns out it's actually a pretty decent move. So if I'm black and my opponent plays b3, he's created massive amounts of tension here on the queen side. The queen side is about to tear itself open. So I need to spend some time and figure out what is the best way forward. And I would actually like you guys to do that at home. Take a little bit of time here, pause the video, and think, what would I play as the black player here? Because this is a clearly critical position. Hopefully you took a little bit of time to sort through this position. As black, there's really an only move. I say there's an only move. There's two possible moves, but one of the moves I don't think I would ever think of. So the engine gives this really strange move, knight a5. This is not a move that would cross my mind in this position. With the point being, after takes, takes d5. Apparently black is fine in this position, which I have a little bit of trouble believing, quite honestly. I would be scared. I would be very, very scared if I had black here. I think black probably has to go bishop c5, but these pawns look menacing, to say the least. So okay, knight a5, apparently it's fine. I wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole. The move I would play as black, and I think what I describe as the only move, is cb3. And the point is, after the obvious queen b3, black has a very nice move, a5. And once again, black is actually going to create that passed pawn on the queen's side, like he wanted. He's sort of getting a little bit of time, and if white ever takes, he has his passed pawn that he wants. So that would be very playable for black. The other try is after cb3, white says, I don't like that position. I'll go ab4. Black has this really annoying move, b2. Not letting you play the convenient queen b3, forcing you to track this pawn down a little bit clumsily. Rook a2, I take the pawn, and I play a5. Again, I have a passed a pawn. That's a little bit scary. Is black better here? Probably not. This knight is still very unhappy. This bishop is quite unhappy. White still has this idea of bringing the knight and playing f4, but I don't think black should be too much worse here. Yeah, cb3 really should be played here. Instead, black played bishop a6, which is a losing move. So, white to play and win. Find the win for white. So white wins quite simply with the series of captures. B takes c4, bishop takes c4, bishop takes c4, d takes c4, and d5. Double attack. It's a piece. It's just a piece. Nothing to be done there. And if after bc4 you don't take it, then I take all your pawns for free, and you're not very happy about that. So white just has a winning position here. White missed this, which he absolutely shouldn't have, because every move's a capture or a threat. Like, I have two legal captures here. I should look at them both. And if I arrive at this point in my calculation, I should at least check this move, which is a threat. And it turns out it's a double threat. Oops. So we're not checking our forcing moves here. This line was fully forced, which means white did not look at all the forcing moves. Instead, he played ab4, which is clearly inferior after knight b4. And the point is, now the same variation doesn't work because d5 does not come with tempo on a piece. So, for instance, takes d5, I just move my queen, and I say, what's the problem? So this is no longer a valid threat. However, after ab4, black played bishop b4, and white did not have to be asked a second time to win a piece. White simply went takes, or a d5. And this wins a piece. So both players missing this tactic once, which seems to be a very simple tactic to me, just forcing moves. We have to analyze these forcing moves. This was a big miss from both players, blundering a win and then blundering an equal position. But we'll see that white's conversion is not satisfactory. This game actually becomes drawn for quite some time. That's a piece. White trades material because, sure, he's up a piece. Why not? Grabs a pawn. Very good. And white is offering a trade of queens because he's up a piece. Seems good to me. I like to trade queens when I'm up a piece. Rook c8. Now, if takes, takes is totally winning because you're going to be up a piece. This pawn won't quite run quickly enough. After they move bishop d4, I'll be in time to stop the pawn. But okay, white plays the very fine move rook d1, which simply guards his stuff. And here, black played the move c3, which loses even more than before. Black probably needs to take this and play this position, which is okay. Or actually, sorry, this excuse me, this doesn't work. This is ridiculous because of the bishop covers. But I mean, here, this actually might be maybe playable for black. Yeah, I'm really not sure why black didn't take c6. It seems like the logical move to play here. But okay, black played c3, and now white has an instant win. If you just check your forcing moves, you'll see it instantly. Takes, that's a capture, check, and win. Immediate win. The game is over. White will be up 2 pieces. The game simply ends. You can't play c2 because you get mated. So, again, white missing simple forcing moves after c3. White plays bishop b6, which is a terrible move because you're threatening the queen, but the queen wants to move anyway. The queen wants to take on c6. So, I mean, any move that's not the instant win is terrible. You should have looked at this forcing move. Bishop b6. I mean, you have to analyze the capture. I don't understand. Takes, takes, takes. And here, white actually has a huge problem. He's giving the piece back. c2 is coming. It's unstoppable. So, check, bishop f8, c2 is coming. What are you going to do? You can't stop this. You can't stop c2. You're going to give a piece back. So, white went ahead and took. Yeah, I mean, he has to. Otherwise, he's going to lose. Something like knight a3, c2. I mean, here you're getting mated, actually, because of the back rank. So taking on c3 is really an only move. Takes, g3 making lift, g6 making lift. And this position is 100% drawn, but we'll see that the game is not drawn, and we'll wonder why that is. We'll try and find out why that happened. Bishop a5, rook c4, sure. I mean, I would put my rook on the second, but nothing wrong with this move. King g7, unpinning. Bishop f4. And here, black made his life a little bit unpleasant for himself. When you have very few pieces on the board, it's even more important that they coordinate well. So when I see this move, bishop c5, I mean, it's well-intentioned with this idea of putting pressure on f2, but we'll see that actually these pieces that are lined up on the c-file are not well coordinated. And it comes from a fairly forcing sequence. Check. Now, you either have to play f6, which looks like a move you don't want to play because of rook d7 check, or the move played in the game, which is king h6, but all of a sudden your king's on h6. That's not so pleasant. Rook d7, very good, putting pressure. And here, Black has already put himself in such a problematic position that he has an only move to keep the game drawn. So take a little bit of time. What should Black play? Hopefully you found that the only move Black has to draw in this position is the move Rook e4. And we'll see why based on the game continuation. Or we'll see the idea at least. Black played f5. Okay, looks super logical. Just my pawn's attacked. Let's get it out of the way. But White actually missed another winning shot here. This is, what is that, our third missed win? Yeah. We can't keep missing these. This one's a little bit less forcing, but still, when I see these pieces stacked up, I want to mess them up. Rook c7. This wins an exchange. This simply wins an exchange. You have to play a move like Rook c1, King g2, and now the problem is, what's really annoying about this, it's kind of nasty. Any bishop move, well, if bishop e3, you just take it, but bishop a3, I have the skewer because of the poorly placed king. And otherwise, you're just giving this piece after bishop d6. So black is just busted. He's going to go down material. And so another missed win from the white side. Again, not super forcing. I'm not taking anything, but I'm creating a pin, and it looks very unpleasant. Although you do have to see this idea at the end. So I can understand. I can understand missing this one actually. This one's a little bit trickier than the other ones. Instead, White played bishop f4, and here g5 played. That's sensible. Bishop e5. Okay, Black says, I don't want my rook to be on the c-file anymore. Very good. Rook d5. Rook c4. This is fine now that the rook can't snuggle up on the 7th. Bishop b2. And rook c2 was a good idea, but not quite right. The problem is after rook c2, White takes f5 as he did in the game, which is a very strong move. And the point is, I guard my pawn, and in order to take my bishop, you have to leave the defense of your bishop. So, when you have this idea of going rook c2 and converging, but it doesn't quite work, you can ask yourself, what can I do to make it work? And one thing you can always try is changing the move order. So, Black can actually pretty much force a draw here with the move bishop f2 check. Gotta check the checks. It's a forcing move, you gotta look at it. Takes rook c2. Notice that this was Black's idea, right? But he does it in a more forcing manner. He changed the move order and draws quite easily. Here it's a 2 versus 2 rook ending. This must be drawn. This is just a dead draw. Nothing to say. So, rook c2, not accurate. And now after rook f5, a nice move from White. Guarding f2, he's going to trade bishops perhaps. This is a 3 versus 2, which should still be drawn, but it does require some good play from the Black player, because now he has to show drawing technique, which he immediately doesn't. So here the move g4 was played, and g4 is a poor move. And the reason g4 is a poor move is that the pawn is getting sort of extended without support. It's an interesting idea. g4 is sort of locking down White's ability to push any majority, but we're going to see that there's an issue with this pawn's being a little bit too far out there. So let's see what happened, how this ended up going. Rook c8, king g7, and now white plays the very strong rook c4. The king is a little bit far away. The point is, if you go king g6, I'll actually come and swoop around this way. And you're going to have some issues with these pawns not being well coordinated. You can maybe go king f5. Yeah, but this shouldn't work out very well for you, actually. It'll be similar to the line I'll show later, where after king f5, check, this move is slightly annoying. So rook c8, king g7, rook c4, h5. And here, white has a chance to showcase a really nice idea. Rook c5 was played, and this gives black the one tempo he needs to sort of consolidate his position. But what you have to realize here is that if black can take back on g4 with the pawn, he draws instantly. So you have to immediately pressure this setup, because right now, if I put pressure here, black will be unable to take back with a pawn. So the move here is the very strong h3. And I'm not sure this wins, but it's a good winning try. The point is, if you do nothing, I'm just going to take both pawns. So you're actually forced to take, which as black you didn't want to do. You want to keep this pawn here, freezing white's pawns, because white now has a passed pawn. We know that's very important in endings. And white is not going to hunt this pawn down with his king, obviously. He's going to get it with the rook. Check. Rook f1, rook f4. Now I'll get this with my king. And like I said, I'm not totally convinced this is winning, but I have winning chances here based on the fact that this pawn is passed. I'm not forced to trade pawns. With the pawn on g4, I would be forced to trade into a 1 versus 0, which would be drawn. Black goes away, take. And here I'm going to combine threats of pushing my pawn with threats against h5. Am I going to win? I don't know. Probably not. But I have chances. After rook c5, I don't have any chances. Because now any h3 will just be met with nothing. I won't take it. Because I don't have to anymore. You won't be able to put enough pressure on g4. King g2, rook b4. Okay, I don't know why the rook is very happy on the second rank, but this is not some losing move. I would just leave the rook on the second, though. h3, rook d4. Again, this is really nitpicky of me, but rooks want to be as far away from the opposing pieces as possible because they're distance pieces. They work really well at distance. This is called checking distance. The black rook wants to be as far away from the king as possible so that he has the longest checks possible, making it difficult for the king to attack the rook. So rook d4, if I wanted to wait, I would play back. But okay. Check. King g7, totally fine. King f5 is also fine, but I should point out, black cleverly avoided this nasty move, or this losing move, king g5, because after h4, rook h6, you lose h5, and with it probably the game. So a good decision by black, going king g7, takes. Again, the right capture. He wants to take back on g4 with the pawn, so that white is forced to trade pawns. Rook d3. Oh, yeah, I can't gloss over this moment. Rook d3 loses the game. You have to play king g6. Rook d3 instantly loses the game. You just lose the pawn. So this is another missed win. Our fourth missed win. This is instant game ender. Your king can't guard the pawn. That's just like simple stuff. So not good endgame play. Just giving away your pawns. King f1, not good endgame play. Not taking your opponent's stuff. King f6, king e2, rook f3, rook c4, king f5, check, check, rook c8, check. Notice that white really can't make any progress here. Okay, sure. King f5, check. And here, rook d3. So, ask yourself, as black, should you trade rooks? The answer is never. You never trade rooks. With the rooks on, you will draw this 2v1 for forever. With the rooks off, you will lose this 2v1 instantly. Which makes it so baffling to me that black simply played rook d3. You have to keep the rooks. It is time to play a move like rook f5, or rook f6, or rook anywhere that is not takeable. You must keep rooks. When you are down material, rook endings will usually draw down a pawn. King and pawn endings will almost never draw down a pawn. I mean, that's not always true, but you're so much more likely to draw the rook ending than the king and pawn. And you can calculate this. Like, after rook d3, king d3, what did you expect? The king just comes and eats the pawn. It's not even like a calculation. The game ended almost instantly. King g6, king e4. I take the opposition. I take the opposition. You lose. You have to give me your pawn. A quick rule for this: if the pawns are pushing up against each other like this, a king that gets to the 3 squares on the side of the enemy pawn will win the pawn, no matter what. So if the white king lands on any of these squares, white will win the pawn instantly. So in this endgame, it's very clear to see, okay, white immediately takes a winning square, and white will be winning. So just a huge blunder from black, just trading into a lost ending for no reason. After rook f5, this should just draw immediately. Say, I mean, if white pushes his pawn, I guess black was worried about the pawn being pushed, but you just take. And funnily enough, in this exact position, you can trade because you get to a drawing square. This is where knowing your king and pawns really helps. Knowing for a fact that this king and pawn will lose, but that this king and pawn will draw. That just comes from studying your king and pawn endings. The reason this draws is A, the white king cannot make it to the key squares, which are 2 squares in front of the pawn, and the white king cannot gain opposition in front of the pawn. In fact, the fact that white cannot step to a square in front of the pawn immediately tells you that the endgame is drawn. I'll just play it out just to prove it. You step back, and black has the opposition here, which means black draws quite easily. So yeah, not a great showing in the end game. A lot of missed ideas that weren't super complicated, but it was a very rich game. I liked this strategic battle on the queen side going on. I think both players had some interesting ideas for playing on the queen side there. yeah, both players, I would recommend brush up on those forcing moves, of course, because there were a lot of missed tactics. But some interesting ideas being played. I was very entertained by this game. I hope you were also entertained by this game. I hope you were entertained by this video. And like I said, next video, something interesting, I promise. Look forward to it. Hasta la vista.